In this lecture, so let us consider analyzing the data gathered using this questionnaire. So the questionnaire measures level of, or rather attitudes of the faculty towards educational or online education. So we have three domains of this questionnaire: the student's learning, class dynamics, and faculty experience. So we will only consider the first one, which is students learning. So these are item 1, item 5, and item number 6. If we will consider the statements, such as for number 1, distance education is not a viable alternative for learning compared to face-to-face environments. Number 5 is students learn less in distance education courses. And number 6, grades will be lower for students in a distance education class. It means that these statements are all negative. So if I will give, or if the faculty now respond that the answer for item 1, or his or her rating is strongly agree, it means that his or her attitude is negative. So if we will interpret this, we will consider this scale wherein you need to compute for the mean, and if the mean is within 1 to 1.49, 1.50 to 2.49, until 3.5 to 4, we can identify the attitudes of the faculty towards online instruction. So if we will use the scale wherein 1 is strongly agree, then we are also saying that if the scale is from 1 to 1.49, so when you round this off, this is equal to 1, then the respondent is, or rather has a very negative attitude toward online education. So if we will continue that, then we can come up with this guide for interpretation. So which means the higher the mean, the more positive is the attitude of the respondents towards online education. So let us consider these two tables to answer the question, what is the level of, or what is the attitude of the faculty towards online education. So we need to present the frequency and percent count in table 1, wherein we will consider frequency and percent in terms of student learning, class dynamics, and faculty experience. And we will also consider the total. While for table 2, we're going to consider the mean or median. Later, we're going to check if the data is appropriate for mean or for median, if we will also analyze per item. So in this lecture, we will only consider one particular domain, and that domain is the students' learning. So let's see our data. So for this data, so where is the data? This one. Okay, so this is the data for item 1, item 5, item 6. And the number of respondents, so let's count for the number of respondents. Let us consider placing now our respondent number. So it's until 30. So we have 30 respondents, and compute for the mean, equal sign, average, open parenthesis, and select the values for item 1, 5, and 6. So these are the respondents in responses, and then click OK. So we just need to drag this to compute for the mean for respondents 1 to 30. Now, in the previous video, I taught you how to use the if function, but in the case of this example, it is okay to Just copy this in order for you to determine what is the attitude. Anyway, the basis for the attitude is the mean, wherein if you round off the value, it will consider now the value rounded into one decimal placed. Or rather, it will consider the whole number. So let's consider the attitude. So what's the attitude? Let's go back to our data. Format cells, number, let's change the decimal into 0. Then click OK. So why did we do that? So simply because, let's go back here. Simply because if we round off the number 1 to 1.49, this is 1, 1.50 to 2.49, rounded to whole number, this is 2, 2.50 to 3.49, it's 3, 3.50 to 4 is the 4. And if I will use this, then I will simply give the codes 1 for negative, 2 for negative, 3 for positive, and 4 for very positive. And then for me to determine now the frequency count and percent, then I'll use histogram 1, 2, 3, 4. If you still remember the data analysis used in the life satisfaction, so you need to come up with the bin. So this is my bin, and then click data, data analysis, and then locate for histogram, click OK. Our input range is the attitude, rounded into one decimal placed. And then for the bin range, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's up to you if you want also to present your data using chart, then you might want to click chart output. Then click OK. So this is now the table for our frequency, but you need to determine also the percent. So the attitude here, 1 corresponds, as mentioned, to a very negative, negative, positive, and very positive. For the total, so let us compute for the total. So we can compute for the total by simply placing equal sign, sum, open parenthesis, and then drag, or rather select your cells B2 to B5, close parenthesis, and click enter. So this is now the frequency, and let us also compute for the percent. So equal sign, that's the formula. Frequency, so let's just select B2 over 30 multiplied by 100. 30 is the total number of respondents, so I use 30. Then click enter. So you just need to drag this, and this is now the result. So you can also limit the number of decimal by formatting the cells. So let's limit it into 2. And then let's just transfer the answer here in the table. So very negative is 0, positive is 7, negative is 7, positive is 8, very positive is 15, for a total of 30. So 15 is 50%, 8 is 26.67%, 7 is 23.33%, and 0 is, of course, 0. So this is for the student learning. So you can also now come up with the frequency and percent distribution for class dynamics, faculty experience, and total after getting the mean of the items involved for class dynamics, faculty experience. And then for the total, you can just simply consider now the mean for student learning, average of the mean of student learning, class dynamics, and faculty experience. Or simply you can just get the average of item 1 until to the last item. And then for table 2, to present now the mean, so as mentioned, either mean or the median. For table 2, so let us go back to our data. Okay, so remember that we have 30 sample size. If you still recall the appropriate measure for our data, if it's at this interval, so this is at this interval because our data is mean, it is appropriate, or the 1, 2, 3, 4 here are simply also ratings, so it is also at this interval. So it means that we need to check for the normality for us to determine if the mean is appropriate for this data. So if you recall, so let us just place that nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio, just to recall the lesson for that. And then let's place mode, median, and mean. So in the our discussion, so we identify the most appropriate measure by considering this table. So if the data is nominal, simply like male, female, so to describe that, there is no other option but to consider mode or the highest frequency. But we cannot determine for the median because there is no higher or lower, or we cannot arrange the data from lowest to highest. And it is also impossible to compute for the mean because it's not number, it is categories. For ordinal, we can compute for, rather we can determine the mode, we can compute for the median, but we cannot compute for the mean, again because simply there is no numbers involved because it's categories. But for the median, we can still arrange our data from lowest to highest and determine what is the middle term. So if our data is ordinal, it is possible to determine what is the median. While for interval, it is possible to determine the mode, the median, and the mean. But for the most appropriate measure, for nominal, it is mode because as mentioned, we do not have any other options. But for ordinal, since median is a higher measure compared with mode, then median is more rather appropriate than the mode. For at this interval data, we need to determine whether our data is normal or not. It's normally distributed or not. Because if it is normally distributed, then we will report for the mean. But if not, or simply if the data is skewed, that is not, of course, normal, then the appropriate is median. So in this data, we have 30 data. I will not check anymore. It is at this interval, yes. I will not check anymore if the data is normally distributed simply because we have what we call the central limit theorem that states that if our sample size is 30 and above, the data approaches to normal. The number of data here is 30, so the appropriate measure is mean. So let us consider that. So what will we do now? Let's just compute the average. So the command for Microsoft Excel to compute for the mean is the average. And then select this. And then you just need to drag your data to come up now with the values of the mean. And then let's place it in the table. So for number 1, it is 2.33. Item 5, it is 2.73. Item 6 is 3.1. And for the overall mean, it is 2.72. Going back to our interpretation, so 2, this is rounded to 3, 3. So if we will look at our data, The value of 2 means